Hey everyone, and welcome back to Zero Escape 999, where last time we explored a bit of the ship, specifically explored the E deck, I believe it was, with June, while waiting for Clover, Seven, and Ace to check out what was behind door 3. I imagine they are probably just about back by now, so we're going to have some pretty sad times coming up, but for now, we're regrouping with Santa and Lotus to see what everyone located in our own explorations of the ship. So you guys found door 1. They'd met back up with Santa and Lotus, who had explained what they found. Apparently there was another numbered door on A deck, just like the one on E deck beyond the door that the Earth key opened. According to Santa and Lotus, there was a 1 on the door. All told, they discovered 2 new doors, the 6th door and the 1 door. It is interesting that the E deck wasn't flooded. Lotus was quiet for a moment, lost in thought. Well, we don't really know if all of E deck is safe. We only checked the area around the elevator. Even so, it's still very interesting. You said the 6th door was there, right? Yeah. Then that means Zero planned all this out, even the sinking. That would have meant some pretty serious remodeling in the ship's interior. It is pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. Yeah, I wonder how long it took. I can't even imagine how much it must have cost. It would have been a ton, that's for sure. Well, that does go along with what Ace was saying. The most reasonable explanation would be that this was done by some organization with access to a whole lot of cash. Yeah, it does make sense. The thought made them all go quiet for a moment. Seriously, there is so much to this. How was this done? I guess it doesn't make sense for Zero to be just a person. It must be an organization. I'm pretty sure that's what Ace was saying. Otherwise, how would they get the resources, just the manpower to do all this? This would have taken a team. June bit her lip while Lotus sighed softly to herself, and Santa cracked a stiff neck and stared off into the distance at nothing. I don't think it's a very good idea to stay here. June looked up at Junpei with large, pleading eyes. How come? Yeah, you're right. Ace and his team might be back already. Good point. We should go meet up with them. Well, Junpei and I should be able to open door 1. Huh? You guys leaving me behind? 8 plus 6 plus 5 is 19. 1 plus 9 is 10. 1 plus 0 is 1. Just kidding. Alright, let's go. Lotus's words were all the impetus they needed. Back to the large hospital room they went. The moment they stepped inside, a tremendous voice echoed across the room.
Hey, where the hell did you guys go?
We were checking stuff out. We couldn't just sit here doing nothing. It was Seven. Ace was right behind him and Clover was behind Ace, although she seemed to be hanging back. It looked as though there was something strange about them. Seven had the look of a man who'd seen a ghost. Ace was just as pale, and Clover looked as though she was only moments from passing out entirely. For a long moment, they simply stood there looking at one another. Junpei looked around nervously, waiting for someone else to speak. No one did. He looked at Seven. What happened?
What the hell kind of a question is that?
Seven was trying very hard to be angry, but something had shaken him hard. His shoulders were trembling and his voice was strained.
Snake is...
Seven couldn't finish. We know what happened. He just looked away, his face twisted by Junpei wasn't sure what. Instead, Ace spoke. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and spoke.
Snake is dead. He died just as the 9th man did.
It was as if all the air had suddenly been sucked out of the room. Junpei felt his heartbeat quicken and realized he was having trouble breathing. He could feel cold sweat beating on his forehead and neck. June, Santa, and Lotus looked the way he felt. All three were frozen in place, their faces white. Oh my god, that's not true, is it? We should make sure. Yeah, right, we should. They nodded to one another and headed for the number 3 door.
Wait, not that way.
They stopped short and turned to look at Seven. He was pointing at the door with no number.
I stuck a screwdriver in there to keep the door from closing all the way. It's not locked, so you can go in that way.
Where is he?
The shower room, on the left side of the hallway. I put a broom in there too to keep the door open.
We can get in without going through the numbered door, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Their new destination cleared, Junpei and his companions headed for the door with no number. Once in the hallway, it was easy to spot the middle door on the left wall. It hadn't been open when they'd been through before. But now, just as Seven had said, there was a broom stuck between the door and the frame, keeping it open. They looked at it for a moment, then stepped inside. It smells horrible! Lotus wrinkled her nose and covered her mouth in disgust. Even Santa pinched his nose shut. Yeah, this is pretty awful. I feel like I'm gonna puke. It was just as bad as they said, perhaps worse. A hideous smell filled the air, so thick they could almost taste it. It was sour and smelled of fish, feces, and burnt meat. Oh my god! It worked its way through Junpei's nose and down his throat to pound against the entrance to his stomach. He put his hands over his mouth and struggled to keep what little was in his stomach where it belonged. They didn't have to wonder where the body was. There was blood everywhere, a few arms of the splatter reaching toward them as they walked in through the door. All one had to do was follow the many radial arms to their source. The body itself was hidden behind a divider. June, you should stay here. But, please, just do me a favor, okay? Alright? Junpei, I don't think you need to worry. I mean, we know how she'll probably react, but at least this time she won't be surprised by it. He didn't give her a chance to say no. He put his hand on her shoulder as if to shove her into the ground like a tent pole, turned and walked toward the end of the divider. It felt like it took an eternity for him to get there. Santa and Lotus followed, timid and nervous as a pair of children. Eventually, they reached the divider. They looked at one another and nodded, slowly. Junpei put his hands on the divider and peered around the corner. For a moment, he forgot to breathe. He felt his heart collapse in his chest like an empty cigarette carton, and time froze. He knew in that instant that he would take the image before him to the grave. What was left of the body sat in a sea of blood. Chunks of flesh torn from the body sat in the blood like tiny islands in a great red sea. A vast ragged hole had been torn in the torso, and what remained of his intestines filled— Why? Again! Again with comparing his intestines to spaghetti. Junpei, why are you like this? Smaller chunks of meat had splattered against the wall and become stuck there as they dried. Globules of yellowish fat had left trails like tiny slugs as gravity pulled them down to the wall, even as they dried to it. Just like Ace said. Santa's voice was strained. Junpei suspected he was holding down some vomit of his own. Just like the ninth man. The detonator in his bracelet set off the bomb in his gut. It looked as though the explosion had been quite powerful. His legs were both bent in an odd, unnatural way, and his left arm had been split open, exposing the painfully white bone of his ulna. His bracelet lay next to him. It seemed to have hit the wall hard enough to have shattered the display, which lay on the ground in pieces. Half of his head had simply collapsed. The blood coating almost made it look like raw pizza dough covered in tomato sauce. Stop it! Oh god, it's already bad enough that it's being described so what's the word? It's a V word. Don't care. It's already bad that it's being described so severely. But why are you comparing him to food? His clothes, too, were covered in blood. The burgundy tie, his white shirt, the jacket with yellow piping, and the gray slacks. They're all familiar to Junpei. No mistake about that. It's Snake. Lotus's voice was unnaturally deep and strained, and Junpei heard it catch in her throat. Oh, I'm so sorry, Clover. I'm so sorry, Snake. The squeal of tortured metal made Junpei's teeth curl. It sounded like the noise a ghost would make. No matter how many times he heard it, he never got used to it. Every time it put him on edge. It didn't help that there was a girl nearby who looked far more like a ghost than a living human should. It was Clover. She sat on the edge of the bed, her head drooping listlessly onto her chest. Her Her eyes were blank and stared across the room at nothing. Her breathing was slow and mechanical. Aside from the rise and fall of her chest, she didn't move. Junpei felt as if even a nudge might cause her to shatter into 1,000 pieces.
Snake was probably murdered. Chances are he was killed the same way the ninth man was.
Seven lowered his voice likely in an effort to keep Clover from hearing what he had to say. There were 4 other people in the room with Junpei and Seven. Ace, Santa, June, and Lotus. Seven looked at each of them in turn and continued.
It's pretty straightforward. Not that hard to figure out how they did it. First, the killers got Snake to authenticate on the red to open door 3. Then they shoved him into it, alone, and waited 9 seconds for the door to shut. Once that door was shut, it was over for Snake, but he didn't give up. He probably knew it wouldn't do him any good, but he probably ran into the shower room looking for the dead. It was a small chance, but it wasn't like he had anything to lose. Unfortunately, it didn't work. The detonator's only deactivated if everybody who authenticated when they went in uses the dead. And then 81 seconds after you're shoved in, that happened.
I see. So that's what you meant by killers, huh? You need at least 3 people to open one of the numbered doors, including Snake. We went over this a while back, first time we went through this. Who could have killed Snake? And every single combination included 7, but it just doesn't make sense. Especially since we were all murdered in the submarine ending. Who did it? Someone. It almost seems like it can't have been one of us. 'Cause Seven was with us when everyone else was murdered, or so there's either many murders, maybe including 0, or they wanted to open for Snake and a single killer.
Exactly. That means we're looking at multiple perps here.
Junpei crossed his arms and grunted. Well, just in case, I want to make sure. Let's say you're right. When do you think Snake was killed?
When we all split up to look for the parts of the Reds, I think. Right after that was when we noticed he was gone.
And that means none of us have alibis. We are all off searching the rooms we'd been assigned looking for those parts. You know, hold on. I think I made a mistake a while back, now that I'm thinking about it. We searched separately from June. Before, I was saying that June could not possibly be responsible because we were with her. But we were with her during the search for Snake, not during the search for the red parts. I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna check something. Okay, I'm back. I went through all of the combinations because I'm like that. And if we include June, there are 3 more possible lists of suspects. In addition to the 3 lists where we have 7 in all of them, there are 3 options where June is in all of them. That is June and Clover, which seems incredibly unlikely because Clover. We've got Ace, Santa, and June. Or we have Ace, Clover, Lotus, and June. Again, Clover seems incredibly unlikely. So Ace, Santa, June is certainly a possibility. And let me see if I can go back far enough in my notebook to find where I went over the potential suspects. Let's see, that's the end of Submarine. There's the fucking jail cells. It's somewhere in here. I've got my notes somewhere in here. The notes are mixed in with my just day-to-day notes. There's the code for the shower room, so it must be... Here we go. Think this is it. The other possibilities were Santa and 7, Clover, 7, and Lotus, or Ace, Santa, 7, and Lotus. So I'm going to put all these together. I'm going to put all of these suspect lists together and we can go over them. Yes, I am like this. Yes, you're just going to have to deal with it. Okay, so we've got Santa 7. We've got Clover 7 Lotus. We've got Ace Santa 7 and Lotus. And then including June, we have Clover June, Ace Santa June, and Ace Clover June Lotus. So that's 6 possible suspect lists. If we cross off Clover, that eliminates half of them. So we've got Santa 7, Ace Santa 7 Lotus, which seems extremely unlikely because that's so many people, or Ace Santa June. Oh, interesting. Oh, very interesting. If we eliminate Clover, then Santa is on every single suspect list. Huh. Interesting. But then that's also kind of true for many of these. Like, every single person is on half of the list. Oh, that's so worrying. Alright then. We were all off searching the rooms we'd been assigned looking for those parts.
Yeah, that means anybody could be a killer.
Wait a minute! What are you talking about? June seemed shocked. How can you say one of us is a killer so casually?
Well, not just one of us. If I'm right, then at least 2 of us are murderers. Why don't you calm down a bit, 7? What are you going to gain by being so suspicious? That's what Zero wants, you know? What Zero wants? Exactly. This game was set up by Zero, wasn't it? Any game has a winner and a loser. Whoever makes it through door 9 is a winner, and those who don't are the losers. Zero's trying to make us fight against one another for that victory. Then you're saying that Zero is trying to split us up by making us fight each other. But then, if I'm going through suspect lists of who's with us, that assumes that Zero is not separate and acting as the killer. But then if Zero took the risk of entering the game to grab Snake and toss him through the 3 door, then Zero could have been spotted. That just seems so risky. But then none of us can be Zero because we all fucking died unless it wasn't Zero who killed everyone. Who killed everyone? Then you're saying Zero is trying to split us up by making us fight each other. Yes, that is why we can't let ourselves fall prey to suspicion. We have to trust one another and form a strong bond of friendship. Otherwise we'll end up ensnared by Zero's manipulations. Then, does that mean that the person who killed Snake? Yes, almost certainly Zero himself. If there's anyone who we should doubt, it should be Zero. He masterminded this game and kidnapped all of us. Doesn't it seem reasonable that he would have killed Snake as well? Junpei hadn't really considered that. If Zero had killed Snake and then Zero was on the ship with them, was Zero still on the ship with him? It has to. He has to be. If he's the one who killed everyone in Submarine, then he has to be on the ship. Otherwise, of course he was. That was obvious. Zero was somewhere on the ship, but Junpei had no idea where. Junpei mumbled to himself, lost in thought. Where could Zero be hiding? But then it doesn't make sense that Zero would break the rules of their own game, of his own game, just to go in and start killing people. It's so bizarre. There's so much manpower and resources put into this. Why break the rules of the game to just go in and start killing people? Where could Zero be hiding? Suddenly everyone went very quiet. The silence was cold and clammy, and Junpei could feel it crawling around across his back and around his throat. Again, he heard the ghosting moaning noise. And moments later, a person who looked more ghost than human appeared. It was Clover. She looked at the floor as she spoke. Her voice was a cold monotone. I think Zero is one of us. Every human body in the room froze. The only sound was a muffled rustling of breath. Eyes darted from face to face. One of those faces was the face of their jailer. But who? Junpei said, I don't know. I don't think Zero's one of us.
Not after what we saw last time. That's crazy. Isn't the ship going to sink in a few hours? If Zero was here with us, he'd be putting himself in danger. Why the hell would he do something like that? There's no motive. Clover looked up at Junpei and her face fell. You don't believe me. Oh, Clover, I'm sorry. It's not that I don't want to believe you, it's just... Her eyes were so pitiful. The moment Junpei met them, he felt his heart tighten. He didn't think what he said was wrong, but perhaps the way he'd said it had been... He'd been too insensitive. Clover had just lost her brother. His death would have been bad enough, but she'd also seen the blasted wreck of his body. Junpei barely knew him, and the sight had been enough to make him sick. What Clover had felt, he couldn't begin to imagine. In the mental state she must have been in, it was understandable that she would look at those around her with suspicion. She felt everyone was against her. The least Junpei could have done was try to understand what she was feeling. He felt ashamed of what he'd said. Perhaps he thought I should apologize. But before that apology could begin...
Clover, I understand what you're feeling. You don't feel that you can trust any of us?
Ace had beaten Junpei to the punch, with exactly the same logic. Good to see people are on the same page on anything. As he spoke to Clover, his face was calm and friendly.
But you have to understand, the more we distrust one another, the further we fall into our true foe's trap. Zero is the one who did those horrible things to your brother. Do you want to let yourself be manipulated by someone who could do such a horrible thing?
Clover didn't answer. She didn't even look at Ace. The whole time her eyes were on Junpei. You could feel Clover's eyes boring into him. They were the color of a deep winter lake. Junpei saw no suspicion in them, only sadness. Then in that horrible silence... They heard a bell begin to ring. It was the clock at the central staircase. 3 in the morning. That means we have 3 hours left.
Then we need to move, now. 7, Clover. I know how you feel, but you do understand that right now, it's important that we trust one another, don't you?
7 and Clover remained silent. Their eyes were looking at something somewhere else, very far away.
We must go, we have very little time left.
Ace's words put their feet to moving. They all knew where they were going. Their next destination was Mercury. It sat, bolted to the wall near the stairs that led to the casino and the kitchen between the 2 elevators. And if you remember, Mercury, I believe, was the key that was found in the shower room. The Mercury card reader. Junpei stood in front of it with the Mercury key card. 7 had given him the card.
I found it when we were checking out the shower room.
At least that's what he said. Junpei slid the card through the reader. The light on the reader turned green and made a tiny electronic noise. Now they were ready. Junpei and Jun had been chosen as the investigators, the reasoning being that they had been to E-Deck before and no one else had. As before, Junpei sent the elevator ahead to make sure the floor they were heading to wasn't flooded. As before, the elevator returned as dry as when it had left. Once it had been checked for water, Junpei and Jun stepped into the elevator. We know what's down here. There were only 2 floor buttons they could push, the C and bottom buttons. The rest were destroyed or did nothing when pushed. Junpei hit the bottom button. The door closed. Slowly, they began to move downward. Sometime later, Junpei and Jun stepped off the elevator and onto the bottom deck. They stepped off and saw that the hallway to the right ended somewhere between 20 and 25 feet from them. The hallway in front of them was a dead end, but not a regular dead end. This is a numbered door. This is the 8th one we found. There were 2 numbered doors on B deck near the central staircase. There were doors 4 and 5. There were 3 more numbered doors in the large hospital room. Doors 3, 7, and 8. Junpei and Jun had found another door on E deck, and Lotus and Santa had found a 7th on A deck. There was a 6 on the door on E deck, and a 1 on the door on A deck. 4, 5, 3, 7, 8, 6, 1. And now, door 2 stood in front of Junpei. There was only one thing it meant. Do you think the next door we find? Yeah, I think so. The next one's gonna be door 9. Despite himself, Junpei felt excited. We have to be close. We have to be. There was something about the excitement that frightened him as well. He did his best to put it from his mind and headed back to C deck with June. Alright, let's open these up. The pieces of paper they'd folded up lay on the ground next to Junpei's legs. There were 7 of them all told. They were written on paper pulled from Junpei's notebook, and each one bore a code name and a door. Why had they decided to vote that way? They decided it wasn't fair to simply ask everyone at once. That would allow people to force others to go through certain doors. Ahem. Door 3, for example. Well, that wasn't the only reason. Junpei had proposed a voting system, and he had a plan. It wasn't a plan he wanted anyone catching wind of, however, so he did his best to act calm as he began to open and read the pieces of paper. The first one read, Ace requests door 1.
Yes, I do.
Would you like me to explain why? No, we don't have the time for that, sorry. Let's keep going. He opened the second one. Next is Santa. He wants door 6. Yeah, that's what I wrote. Junpei continued with the 3rd, 4th, and 5th pieces of paper. Clover wants 1, Lotus wants 2, and 7 also wants 2. So what's the tally so far? We've got Ace. We've got 3 doors. 1, 2, and 6. We've got Ace requests 1. Santa requests 6. Clover wants 1. Lotus wants 2, and 7 wants 2. So, door 1 has 1 and 4 makes 5. It needs Junpei to go through. Okay. 2 has 7 and 8 is 15 is 6. It would need Clover to agree to going through for them to go through door 2. And door 6 has just Santa. Well, things are looking a little bit awkward for everyone. It looks like these are going to be some tough combinations to work out. Wait a minute. There's no way I'm going anywhere with the Elephant Man. Okay, you two please don't. No, there'd be no point to the voting if we let people change their choices because of stuff like that. But
just give it up, Lotus. It's not like I want to hang out with some exhibitionist grandma.
Oh my god, please, you two, knock it off. Can we stop with the fighting? I'm not an exhibitionist. I'm wearing clothes.
Barely.
So? Last I checked, that's not a crime.
Maybe, but what about common decency? Nobody wants to have to look at a chick who looks like a half-naked raisin.
Jesus Christ, 7. I'm gonna kill you! And, oh dear, they are going to kill each other. Lotus's hair flared out like the mane of an angry lion and she roared with a voice that shook the walls. With some difficulty, Ace managed to restrain her. No, 7 kinda deserved it.
Junpei, read the rest.
Right. Junpei tore his eyes away and looked down at the 6th piece of paper. He opened it. June wants door 6. Okay, so that's 9 for door 6. That's a total of 9. So it would need a June again. It would need June again to go through. That's a problem. Yes, I don't really have a reason, I just felt like it. All the papers save Junpei's had been read. He did some quick calculations in his head. People who requested door 1, Ace and Clover. This was the door on A deck near the central staircase. People who requested door 2 were 7 and Lotus. This was the door on the bottom deck and could be reached by taking the elevator to the bottom of the ship. People who requested door 6 were Santa and June. This was the door on E deck and could be reached by taking the elevator near the central staircase down. It took him less than a second to run the numbers. He opened the 7th piece of paper and spoke. Okay, the last one is mine. I want to go through, and our choice of which door we go through, we'll be making next time. I will see everyone next time as we enter our 3rd numbered door for this route.